Right now, your mind may be reaching for threads that are already tangled, trying to pull them straight, hoping that if you just find the right angle, the whole pattern will finally make sense. Maybe you feel the ache of a day spent holding the weight of a loom that never stops turning. You are lying down, yet your hands seem to be searching for the shuttle, your thoughts still looping through the same patterns, trying to fix the fraying edges of what happened yesterday or what might unravel tomorrow. The room is quiet, the air is cool against your skin, and the fabric of the evening has settled into a deep indigo hush. Yet inside you, the inner weaver is still at work. You feel that if you stop, the whole design will come undone. You feel that if you do not pay attention, the image of your life will lose its shape. Perhaps you came here because the exhaustion of being the one who keeps everything together has finally become too heavy to carry. It is a specific kind of fatigue, the tiredness of the architect who is afraid to sleep, because the structure might collapse the moment the eyes close. You are not broken, and the restlessness you feel is not a failure of character or a sign that you are doing something wrong. It is simply the habit of a mind that has learned to treat existence as a task that must be completed. Tonight, we will not try to force the mind to be silent. We will not ask you to clear your head or achieve a perfect state of stillness. Instead, we are going to look at the work of the weaver, the beauty of the unfinished, and the quiet truth that the pattern of your life is not a mistake that needs fixing, but a tapestry that is already being woven by the very breath that moves through you. The mind does not become peaceful because you force it to be still. It becomes peaceful when you stop treating every thought as a command that must be obeyed, and every worry as a loose thread that must be yanked at until the entire cloth begins to pucker. Letting go does not mean you have given up on your life. It means you have stopped turning your life into a series of problems to be solved. You are safe enough to soften. You do not have to solve your whole life tonight. You do not have to hold the tension of the world in your shoulders or your jaw. There is nothing required of you in this space. No progress is needed. No goal is waiting for you to reach it. And no finished product is expected of you. Consider the act of weaving. A weaver spends hours, sometimes days, focused on the intersection of warp and weft. If the weaver decides that every single strand must be perfectly aligned, every knot hidden, and every color arranged with absolute precision, the act of creation becomes a prison. The fear of a mistake turns the joy of the craft into a burden. You have been living this way, constantly watching the loom of your own mind, fearing the loose threads, terrified that a single misplaced thought will ruin the beauty of the design. You believe that your safety depends on your vigilance. You believe that if you stop pulling, if you stop adjusting, everything will unravel into chaos. But what if the flaws you see are not errors? What if the gaps in your planning are not failures of design, but the very places where the light of your humanity is allowed to pass through? Take a slow breath, letting it rise and fall in its own rhythm, without trying to make it deeper or slower than it naturally wants to be. Just feel the way the air moves through you, independent of your effort. You do not have to create the breath, it happens for you. In the same way, the tapestry of your life is unfolding, and you are not solely responsible for the strength of every thread. When you feel that sharp tug of anxiety, that sudden urge to fix a conversation that happened years ago, or to perfect a plan for a future that hasn't arrived, notice the feeling in your hands. Are they clenched? Is there a tightness in your chest that feels like a knot being pulled too tight? That is the feeling of the weaver who has forgotten that they are allowed to stop, to set the shuttle down, and to simply look at what has been created so far. There is a quiet wisdom in the hands of one who has truly learned the craft. It is the wisdom of knowing when the work is enough for the day, when the loom must be left in silence, and when the weaver must step away to let the material rest. You have been weaving for a long time, dear friend. You have woven through seasons of joy, and through periods of deep, quiet grief. You have held the threads of your responsibilities, your relationships, and your expectations, and you have woven them with a care that is both beautiful and exhausting. But tonight, you are invited to recognize that you are not the one who must ensure the pattern remains eternal. Even the most intricate ancient tapestries have edges. Even the most beautiful designs have variations in the weave. These variations do not break the fabric, they give it its character, its depth, and its story. As you lie here, let the weight of your body sink into the surface beneath you. Feel the boundary where your skin meets the softness of the world. Imagine that your worries are not commands to be followed, but threads of different colors and textures that have been laid out before you. Some are bright and smooth, others are frayed or dark, but you are no longer obligated to weave them all into a picture that satisfies an unseen observer. You can simply notice them. You can observe the color, the texture, and the way they move in the light of your awareness, without needing to tie them into a knot. You are the space in which these threads appear. You are the stillness that allows the loom to exist. If you find your mind wandering back to the desire to straighten a thread, to smooth a rough edge, or to pull the tension tight, just notice that urge. Do not judge it, do not criticize yourself for wanting to be in control. Instead, acknowledge it with the same gentle curiosity you might have for a bird that lands on your windowsill and then flies away. You do not need to capture the bird to enjoy its presence. You do not need to pull the thread to recognize its place. You are safe in this recognition. You are grounded in the simple rhythmic act of existing, which is far deeper than the act of doing. In a moment, we will look at a story of a weaver who tried to do exactly what you are doing, trying to weave the perfect life by pulling at every loose end. And we will see what happened when the master finally showed him the nature of the cloth. But for now, just rest in the acknowledgement of your own effort. You have carried much. You have been the guardian of your own design. You are allowed to be tired. You are allowed to let the tools rest on the floor. There is nothing to prove to the night, and there is no pattern you must finish before the sun rises. The design is safe. The weaver is safe. Everything that needs to be woven will be woven in its own time. For now, there is only the breath, the soft space of the room, and the quiet permission to simply stop pulling. In a high, windswept valley where the air always tastes of crushed pine needles and distant snow, there lived a young weaver named Kalen. His workshop was a simple structure of cedar and stone, perched on a ledge that overlooked the vast, shifting colors of the valley floor below. Kalen was known throughout the mountain villages for the exquisite density of his work. People said that his tapestries were unbreakable, that they held the heat of summer and the stillness of winter in every knot. But Kalen himself knew a secret, one that grew heavier with every passing season. He was terrified of his own loom. His loom was a massive frame of dark, polished oak, its upright beams scarred by years of constant tension. Kalen kept a silver shuttle that moved with a relentless clicking rhythm. He spent his days in a state of hypervigilance, his eyes tracing the path of every silk thread, his ears tuned to the slightest friction. He was convinced that if he missed a single uneven pull, if he allowed a thread to lie slack for even a moment, the structural integrity of his life would fail. He saw his own existence as a tapestry that was perpetually unraveling at the edges. Every time a thought of worry surfaced, a memory of a mistake, a fear of future scarcity, a doubt about his own skill, Kalen took it as a personal failure of his weaving. He would rush to the frame, his heart pounding in his chest, and pull at the threads until his fingers were raw and the silk began to fray from the sheer intensity of his grip. One evening, as the light turned a bruised purple and the wind began to moan through the rafters, an elderly woman appeared at his door. She was the village mender, someone who walked from town to town, carrying only a small bundle and a reputation for knowing the history of every cloth in the region. She did not speak at first, but walked into the workshop, her eyes scanning the loom with a look of profound recognition. Kalen stood back, his shoulders rigid, his hands still trembling from his latest session of frantic correction. The woman approached the loom. She reached out, not to the intricate, finished panels that hung on the walls, but to the loom itself. She ran her calloused fingers over the heavy, weighted wooden beater that pressed the rows of thread together. It was a solid utilitarian object, battered and smooth from thousands of hours of use. She picked up a loose thread, a shimmering blue strand that had worked itself free from the main body of the work. Kalen stepped forward, a reflexive gasp escaping his throat, expecting her to weave it back in, to hide the flaw, to save the design. Instead, the woman held the blue thread out between her thumb and forefinger, letting it dangle in the dim light of the lantern. She looked at Kaylin, her expression neither judging nor particularly kind, just steady. She did not move to fix the thread. She simply asked, "Why do you believe that the strength of the tapestry depends entirely on your fear of the whole?" Kaylin hesitated. The question felt like an intrusion into the very fortress he had built around his sanity. He looked at the thread, then at his own hands, then back at the woman. "If the threads are not tight," he replied, his voice thin in the vast space of the room, "then the cloth becomes loose. If it is loose, it cannot hold anything. It becomes useless. It becomes just a pile of strings." The mender nodded slowly. She walked over to a window that looked out onto the darkening valley. She gestured for Kaylin to come closer. He moved cautiously, his movements stiff with the habit of control. She placed the blue thread onto the windowsill, and then pointed to the valley floor, where the tall grasses were swaying in the rhythmic, unchecked currents of the mountain wind. "Look at the grass," she said, softly. "The wind pulls at it constantly. It is never perfectly straight. It is never perfectly still. And yet, does it unravel? Does the meadow fall apart because the wind is not controlled?" Kaylin watched the grass. He saw how it yielded, how it leaned, how it allowed the wind to move through it without trying to trap the breeze inside its own stems. "The grass is different," he murmured. "It is meant to bend." "And you," the woman said, turning back to him, "are you so different? You believe that your piece is a product you must manufacture, a fabric you must weave every day from the scraps of your own anxiety. You think that by pulling harder, by tightening the tension of your mind, you are creating safety. But look at your shuttle. Kaylin, look at the silver." She pointed to the shuttle resting on the workbench. It was deeply scratched, the finish worn away by the heat of his palm. She walked over, picked it up, and handed it to him. It felt unusually heavy in his hand, a weight he had become so accustomed to that he had forgotten it was there. "This object is what you have used to build your prison," she said. "You have mistaken the weight of the tool for the weight of your life. Every time you worry, you are gripping this shuttle, convinced that if you release it, the work will stop. But the work is not yours to finish. The pattern is already unfolding in the spaces between your efforts." Kaylin looked at the shuttle. He had spent years equating this tool with his identity. If he was not the man who wove the threads, who was he? If he was not the protector of the design, who would keep the chaos away? The woman sat down on a low wooden stool, her movements slow and deliberate, the complete antithesis of his own frantic, darting energy. She picked up a small, weathered bowl of cool water from a side table and set it near the loom. "I will stay here tonight," she said, her voice blending with the distant sound of the wind. "I am not here to finish your weaving. I am here to witness the weaver learning to let his hands rest. You have spent your entire life pulling against the current, Kaylin. You are tired because you are trying to hold the world together with nothing but your own will. That is a heavy burden, even for a master." She reached out and lightly tapped the frame of the loom. The sound was dull, a hollow thud that echoed into the rafters. "The loom is just wood. The threads are just fiber. The worry is just a thought. None of these things are you, but you have glued your spirit to them. And so, every time a thread breaks, you feel as though you are the one tearing. You are not the thread, Kaylin. You are not the design. You are the space in which the weaving happens." She motioned toward the small, empty patch of wall beside his largest tapestry. "Stop working," she said. "For this one night, set the shuttle down. Do not weave. Do not plan the next row. Do not think about the mistakes you made yesterday or the gaps you fear for tomorrow. Just sit. Listen to the room. Feel the air as it moves through the windows, as it moves through the thread, as it moves through you. The fabric will not fall off the loom. The world will not unravel because you chose to take a breath." Kaylin felt a sharp, sudden resistance. It was the fear of letting go, the panic of the one who believes that stillness is an invitation to ruin. But the woman remained still, her presence like an anchor in the storm of his thoughts. He looked at the silver shuttle in his palm, the familiar, cold weight of his own anxiety. He walked toward the table, his heart beating a frantic, uneven rhythm, and he placed the shuttle into the bowl of water. It sank with a soft splash, the silver disappearing beneath the surface, silent and contained. He expected to feel a sense of catastrophe, a tearing of the fabric of his reality. Instead, he felt a strange, quiet shudder run through his shoulders. For the first time in years, the space between his palms felt empty, and yet nothing collapsed. The workshop remained. The mountain remained. The night continued to unfold, indifferent to his struggle, patient with his confusion. He sat on the floor, his back against the base of the loom, and for the first time he did not look up to see if the threads were straight. He let his eyes soften, letting the darkness of the room become a place of rest rather than a source of hidden threats. The woman did not say another word, and the silence began to fill the room, no longer heavy with anticipation, but light with the potential for something else, something he had been missing, buried under the constant, desperate rhythm of his own internal weaving. You are in that room now, sitting on the cool stone floor, the silver shuttle lying at the bottom of the water. You are realizing that the tension in your mind was never actually holding the world together. It was only holding your heart in a grip that kept it from feeling the steady, underlying rhythm of the life that is already here, already whole, and already enough. In a moment we will look at what happens when the weaver realizes that the gaps in his work are the most beautiful part of the design. But for now, just notice the silence in your own hands. Notice how the muscles of your arms, so long accustomed to the tension of the loom, are finally beginning to slacken, just a fraction. There is no need to rush to the next thought. There is no need to go and find the shuttle. You are perfectly safe in this moment of not doing. And the stillness is, in fact, the only thing you have ever truly needed to find. The silence Kalen found when he placed his shuttle into the water was not an absence of life, but the presence of something deeper. It was the space where the loom stopped dictating the rhythm of his breathing. We often believe that if we stop the frantic motion, the world will cease to exist, or at least, the version of the world we have painstakingly assembled will vanish. But what the mender showed Kalen was not a rejection of his craft. She did not ask him to burn his loom or abandon his work in the mountains. She asked him to observe the difference between the weaving and the weaver's fear. This story is not telling us that having a purpose is wrong, or that caring about the quality of our life is a mistake. It is showing us that our suffering is rarely caused by the work itself. The true burden is the way we hold the tool. When we believe that our identity is tied to the perfection of our results, every mistake feels like a fracture in our own bones. We begin to treat our thoughts as if they are structural beams, and if one thought is crooked, we fear the roof will fall. We become like a weaver who stares at a single tangled thread for hours, convinced that the entire cloth is ruined, failing to notice that the sunlight is still hitting the floor and the mountain air is still crisp and clean. Buddhist wisdom suggests that we often add a second wound to the first. The first wound is the difficulty of life, the things that go wrong, the disappointments, the natural messiness of being human. That is unavoidable. We will face frustration, we will face failure, and we will face the changing nature of everything we hold dear. But the second wound is what our minds add to those events: the judgment, the panic, the insistence that things should be different than they are. When we say, "I should have done better," or "if I don't fix this now, I am worthless," we are not merely dealing with the original event. We are weaving a new heavy layer of suffering on top of it, and then we wonder why we are so exhausted. You have been carrying this second wound for a long time. Every time you lay down to sleep and your mind starts to recount the errors of the day, you are picking up the shuttle again. You are attempting to weave a story that makes you responsible for things that are already in the past. You are trying to use your mind to control the future, treating the vast, unpredictable landscape of your life as if it were a simple cloth that you could straighten with your own hands. But life does not follow the pattern you drew in your mind. The threads pull in directions you did not anticipate, and the gaps, the frayed edges, and the loose ends are not evidence of your failure. They are simply part of the fabric of existence. To let go, in the way the mender taught Kalen, is not to become indifferent or cold. It is not an invitation to stop trying or to lose your passion for what you love. It is the practice of recognizing that you are the space in which these things occur, not the one who must force every outcome into alignment. When you realize that you are the weaver, not the thread, you can look at your mistakes without feeling that you are becoming a mistake. You can feel the sting of a disappointment, without deciding that the entire tapestry of your life is worthless. There is a powerful insight here about the nature of attachment. We often hold on to our worries because we think they are the only things keeping us alert and safe. We believe that if we were to stop obsessing over our problems, we would become careless. This is the great illusion of the anxious mind. We think that vigilance is the same as wisdom. We think that holding a grudge or replaying a painful conversation is a form of protection. Yet, this constant mental tightening is exactly what prevents us from seeing clearly. Just as a hand clenched into a tight fist cannot hold anything, a mind that is clenched around a single outcome cannot experience the richness of what is actually happening. Think of how often you have tried to solve your life by thinking about it. You might spend hours in bed, the lights low, your eyes closed, trying to unravel a knot in your mind. You think that if you just find the right angle, the right perspective, or the right solution, you will finally earn the right to be at peace. But this is the paradox. Peace is not something you earn by perfecting your life. Peace is what you find when you realize the life you are living is already in the process of unfolding, and it is doing so without your constant supervision. You do not need to pull the threads to make the morning come. You do not need to analyze the grass to make it grow. The rhythm of the world is steady, and you are part of that rhythm, not the person in charge of it. You might feel a resistance to this. You might think, but if I don't plan, if I don't worry, I will fall behind. This fear is a very old thread in the tapestry. It feels familiar, and therefore it feels safe, but consider the cost of that safety. What have you missed while you were busy pulling at the loose threads of yesterday? What beauty in the present moment has been obscured by the dust of your own internal struggle? The mender did not tell Kalen that he was a bad weaver. She told him that he was holding his life with too much intensity. She invited him to place the shuttle in the water, to let the tool go, just for a moment, to see that the world remained, and that he remained, and that both were more than the work he was trying to force into shape. This teaching is about developing a different relationship with your own mind. It is about recognizing that your thoughts are not commands. They are mental events. They arise, they persist for a time, and they pass away. But when we believe that they are absolute truths, we attach ourselves to them. We identify with the thread that is fraying. We say, I am a worried person, or I am a failure, because we see a loose end in our life. But that is like looking at a single thread and deciding it represents the entire cloth. You are not your worry. You are not your mistake. You are the vast, quiet awareness that notices the worry, notices the mistake, and is capable of resting in the middle of it all. Compassion in the Zen tradition begins with this self-recognition. It is the ability to look at your own suffering and say, this is hard and I am here for it. It is not about fixing yourself. It is about being with yourself. When you can witness your own restlessness without needing to turn it into a project to be solved, something shifts. The tight knot in your chest begins to loosen, not because you forced it to, but because you stopped pulling against it. You started giving it space, and in that space the breath has room to move, the heart has room to beat, the body has room to drift toward the deep, natural rest that it has been seeking all day. You do not need to be a perfect weaver to be worthy of peace. You do not need to have your life fully planned, your mistakes erased, and your future secured to deserve a night of quiet sleep. The tapestry is messy, yes. It is filled with variations and unexpected turns, but it is also resilient. It is woven into the very fabric of the world, and it is held by the same life force that breathes through the mountains and the valleys. Your attempt to control it was a form of love, perhaps a misguided attempt to protect yourself from pain. But tonight, we can acknowledge that love without needing to sustain the control. We can set the heavy shuttle down. We can watch it sink into the cool, dark water of the night, leaving our hands empty and light, ready for the stillness that is already waiting to receive us. Everything you have been holding is allowed to be set down now. The stories you tell yourself about what you need to fix, the mental lists you keep of your perceived flaws, the phantom pressure to perform, these are just threads. They have no power over you unless you decide to pull on them. Right now, you are in a workshop of your own making, but the doors are open to the night air. The lantern is dim, the floor is cool, and there is no expectation of labor. You are just a human being, tired from the long day, and you are allowed to stop weaving. You are allowed to be unfinished. You are allowed to simply exist in the space between the thoughts, where the silence is gentle and the rest is deep, and the pattern of your life is unfolding in exactly the way it needs to. Whether you are watching it or not, if it feels right, let your hands rest openly in your lap, perhaps palms upward, as if you are finally releasing the silver shuttle you have held for so long. There is no need to make your hands look a certain way, only to notice that they no longer have to grasp at anything. Let your fingers uncurl. Feel the space that opens in your palms when the tension is allowed to drain away. This is not a formal posture of meditation. It is simply the natural shape of a hand that has stopped trying to weave the world into order. Bring your attention to your breathing, not to control it, but to observe it as the thread that connects you to the present moment. You do not need to pull the breath in, nor do you need to push it out. It is moving through you like a shuttle gliding through a loom, back and forth, rhythmic and steady. Notice the way the air flows across your lips, into the lungs, and then out again. A cycle that requires nothing from you. You are the space where this cycle happens. You are the workshop that remains still while the breath does its work. If a thought about tomorrow appears, a list of things you believe you must fix, a memory of a loose thread from earlier today, see it for what it is. A single colorful strand. Do not try to catch it. Do not try to weave it into a pattern. Just name it silently to yourself. You might say, that is a thought about the future, or that is a worry about my work. Naming it is like looking at the thread without picking it up. It is enough to know it is there. Perhaps you can imagine your mind as that cedar workshop on the mountain ledge. The room is cool and quiet. Outside, the wind is moving through the valley, swaying the tall grasses. But inside, the air is still your worries. Those threads you feel you must constantly manage can be visualized as individual strands of silk scattered on the floor. You are not required to weave them. You are not required to pick them up. You can simply look at them, scattered in the dim light, acknowledging their texture, their color, their weight, without the need to turn them into a tapestry. You are the weaver who has decided, just for this night, to let the loom sit empty. If you find that your mind is still darting toward the loom, reaching for the silver shuttle, do not judge yourself. That urge is just an old habit, a conditioned reflex from years of trying to hold the world together. When you notice the urge, acknowledge it gently. You could imagine yourself picking up that familiar silver shuttle, feeling the weight of it, and then, with a slow, deliberate movement, walking over to that bowl of cool water we imagined earlier. You do not need to throw it with force. Just let your fingers open. Watch as it breaks the surface of the water, sinking down until it is completely submerged, hidden from the frantic light of your internal gaze. The weight is gone from your hand. The water holds it now. Feel the muscles in your jaw as you do this. Often, we hold our anxiety there, as if we are biting down on the very threads we are trying to weave. Let your teeth part slightly. Let your tongue rest on the floor of your mouth. Notice how the muscles of your neck and shoulders begin to soften. Once you acknowledge that you do not have to hold the tension of the loom in your own body. You are not the frame. You are not the oak beams. You are the quiet presence that notices when the frame is tight and chooses to let it be. If a particular concern keeps returning, a specific loose end that feels like it might unravel everything, treat it with the same gentle curiosity. Instead of pulling at it, imagine it as a thread lying on the workbench. It is just a thread. It does not have the power to define your existence. It is not the tapestry itself. See if you can. Just for a few moments, let it lie there exactly as it is, frayed perhaps, or tangled, without rushing to smooth it out. What happens when you grant yourself permission to let the loose end be loose? Does the workshop fall down? Does the mountain move? Or does the night simply continue to breathe around you, steady and vast? There is no need to achieve a state of emptiness. Your mind may continue to produce thoughts, just as a mountain continues to produce mist. That is what minds do. The practice is not to stop the production, but to stop identifying with the product. You are the mountain, not the mist. You are the room, not the threads. Even if your mind is busy, even if you feel you have failed to clear the space, simply noticing that your mind is busy is a moment of profound clarity. That noticing that silent, steady awareness is the weaver who has stopped trying to control the weave. If it helps, you might place a hand over your heart, feeling the steady, rhythmic beat beneath your ribs. This is the only weaving that matters tonight. The heart beats without your command. The blood flows without your guidance. The body repairs itself without your supervision. You are being woven by a wisdom far older than your conscious mind. A wisdom that knows how to create beauty from chaos without ever feeling the need to hurry. Let your heartbeat be your metronome. Let the breath be the shuttle that moves in and out, leaving the threads of your life exactly where they belong, ungathered, unforced, and completely at rest. You do not need to resolve the dilemmas of your life before you fall asleep. The problems will still be there in the morning, but you will meet them with a different heart, one that has tasted the coolness of the water, where the shuttle now rests. For now there is only the descent into stillness. There is only the recognition that you have done enough for today. The loom is silent, the cedar floor is cool, the valley outside is dark, and the mountain is holding you in its quiet embrace. You have earned the right to simply exist. You have earned the right to be a person who is not always building, not always fixing, not always refining the pattern. If you notice your mind beginning to reach for the shuttle again, simply observe the movement. Do not struggle against the thought. Do not try to block it. Just notice the reaching. Recognize it as the echo of your own protective love, the part of you that wants to ensure you are safe, and offer it a moment of kindness. Thank the mind for its vigilance. Acknowledge that it was trying to help. And then gently, so gently, let the thought pass on through, like a cloud moving across the face of the moon. The moon is not changed by the cloud. Your awareness is not changed by the thought. You remain steady and clear in the center of the night. Every time you return to the breath, you are choosing to come home to the present moment. You are choosing to set down the heavy tools of your anxiety. You are choosing to trust that the tapestry is unfolding, even when you are not pulling the threads. This is the practice. It is not about reaching a destination. It is about the gentle, repeated act of letting go of the need to be the one who directs the loom. You are being held by the same life that weaves the seasons and turns the stars. You are part of that movement, and you are entirely safe in it. The silence is growing deeper now. The space in the room feels wider, more open, as if the walls themselves have softened. There is no urgency, there is no call to action. There is only the slow, rhythmic settling of your body into the warmth of your bed, and the quiet, steady permission to be exactly as you are, unfinished, unhurried, and perfectly at peace in the middle of your own unfolding life. In the quiet that follows, stay with that sensation of open hands, of empty palms, and of the shuttle resting deep beneath the surface, where it no longer has the power to pull at your spirit. You have let go, and in that letting go, you have finally found the space to simply breathe. Years later, in a different valley where the winters were long and the silence felt absolute, there lived a student named Iwan. He was a master of detail, known for weaving tapestries so precise they looked like paintings. Yet Iwan lived in constant quiet agony. He was haunted by the memory of a great tapestry he had once attempted, a complex, ambitious design meant to honor his family's lineage, which had been ruined mid-process by a sudden, violent storm that flooded his workshop and left the threads tangled, stained, and frayed beyond repair. He had abandoned the project, but he could not abandon the thought of it. Every night his mind would return to the image of the ruined loom, replaying the moment the water broke through door. He felt that until he could somehow account for that failure, until he could weave a new piece that surpassed the beauty of the lost one, his life was incomplete. He lived in the shadow of the local monastery, where a teacher known only as the master of the unfinished sat by a small, slow-burning hearth. Iwan often visited, not to ask for wisdom, but to seek a way to fix the past. He would sit near the teacher, his mind busy with calculations, constantly rearranging the threads of his memory, trying to find a configuration that would make the ruin of his past tapestry make sense. He was looking for a reason, a justification, or perhaps a way to reweave the history he could not change. One afternoon, the master stood up and walked to a large, heavy chest near the wall. He beckoned for Iwan to help him. Together they pried open the heavy, rusted iron lid. Inside there was no gold, no silk, no treasure. The chest was filled with hundreds of pieces of broken, discarded clay shards of pottery, cracked roof tiles, and jagged bits of stone. The master reached in and pulled out a jagged, stained piece of a heavy clay vessel. He handed it to Iwan. It was cold, sharp, and utterly useless. "This is the history of the kiln," the master said, his voice as dry as the clay itself. "It was once part of a perfect water jar. Then the fire inside became too hot, it shattered. The potter didn't weep over the pieces. He didn't try to glue them back together into the shape of a jar. He simply accepted that the jar had fulfilled its purpose by breaking." Iwan looked at the shard. His heart felt the familiar, sharp pull of the weaver who sees a broken thread. "But it's ruined," Iwan insisted, his voice tight. "It was meant to hold water. Now it holds nothing. How can a thing be purposeful if it fails its intended form?" The master did not answer with words. He took the shard back, walked to the hearth, and placed it near the flames, not to heat it, but to let it be warmed by the ambient glow. He then picked up a small, blunt wooden chisel and a mallet. "The failure isn't in the breaking, Iwan. The failure is in your refusal to let the broken piece become something else." He sat down and began to tap at the shard, not to shape it, but to gently chip away the sharp, dangerous edges. He worked with a slow, hypnotic focus. Iwan watched, his breath caught in his throat. He expected the master to try to rebuild the jar. He expected him to try to force the piece into a new, improved shape. But the master was only making the edges soft. He was taking the jagged, biting part of the shard and turning it into something that could be held without cutting the skin. "You have been carrying the memory of your ruined loom like a shard of glass in your heart," the teacher said, not looking up. "Every day, you pick it up, and every day it cuts you. You believe that by keeping the memory sharp, you are somehow honoring the loss. You think that if you stop bleeding, you are forgetting. But look at this piece now." The master held it out. The sharp, painful edge was gone, replaced by a smooth, rounded surface. It was still a broken piece of clay, but it no longer possessed the power to harm the one who held it. "You cannot reweave the storm," the master continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The rain fell. The workshop flooded. The threads were lost. That is the history of the clay. But you are not the storm, and you are not the ruins. You are the one who has been holding onto the broken pieces, wondering why your hands are bleeding." Iwan felt a strange, terrifying stillness wash over him. For years, he had been convinced that his suffering was a form of loyalty to the life he had lost. If he stopped hurting, he felt he would be betraying the beauty of what he had once dreamed of creating. But as he looked at the smooth shard in the master's palm, he realized that his loyalty was only creating more waste. He was not protecting the past, he was preventing the present from existing. The master stood up and walked to the door of the hut, opening it wide to the snowy landscape. The wind whipped in, carrying the scent of pine and cold earth. "The weaver must eventually step away from the loom," the teacher said. "You have been living in the room where the flood happened, but the flood is over. The water dried up long ago. The only thing still drowning in that room is your own heart." Iwan stepped outside into the biting cold. He stood there for a long time, the snow settling on his shoulders. He felt the weight of his identity, the identity of the weaver who had failed, the man whose life was defined by a single disaster. He closed his eyes, and for the first time, he did not try to weave a new story. He did not try to justify the past or plan for a future victory. He simply felt the cold, the silence, and the vast, indifferent beauty of the mountain night. He turned back to the hut. The master was already sitting by the hearth, the shard lying on the dirt floor forgotten. Iwan sat down. He didn't pick up the shard. He didn't try to fix the master's work. He just breathed. He felt the tightness in his chest, the habitual frantic desire to fix, to change, to adjust, and he did not fight it. He let it be tight. He let it be uncomfortable. He didn't ask it to go away. He simply watched it, as if it were a weather pattern passing over the peaks of the distant mountains. In that moment, the transformation occurred. It wasn't a sudden burst of light, or a permanent erasure of his grief. It was the simple, profound act of stopping the internal struggle against his own history. He stopped trying to make the storm into anything other than a storm. He stopped trying to make his failure into anything other than a failure. He realized that the failure was not a definition, it was a transition. It was the breaking of the jar that allowed the clay to be reformed. He stayed there until the fire burned low, his hands resting on his knees, open and empty. When he eventually rose to leave, he walked past the chest of broken shards without a second glance. He no longer needed to hide them, and he no longer needed to carry them. The past was exactly where it belonged, in the history of the kiln. He walked out into the night, and though he still felt the sadness of the loss, he felt it in the same way one feels the cold wind, as a part of the world, not as a hole inside himself. You are sitting in that same room now, in the stillness that follows the realization. Perhaps you have been carrying your own shards, the memories of things that didn't go as planned, the losses you haven't yet forgiven, the projects or the lives that feel like they ended in a flood. You have been clutching them so tightly that you have forgotten what it feels like to have open hands. Tonight, you are invited to set the shards down. You do not need to resolve the past. You do not need to turn your failures into something else. You only need to stop gripping the jagged edges. Let them be what they are. Let the history remain the history, and let your heart finally be allowed to rest, unburdened by the weight of things that are already gone. The room is quiet. The fire is embers, and the only thing required of you is to allow the silence to hold you, just as the earth holds the mountain, steady, ancient, and completely at peace. The weight you carry is rarely the weight of the world itself. It is the weight of your own hand pressing down on the loom, convinced that if you release your grip, the fabric will vanish. This is the mechanism of suffering, the subtle, quiet engine that keeps you awake long after the sun has set. We believe that by holding on, by analyzing, by replaying the past, and by rehearsing the future, we are weaving a shield against the unpredictable nature of existence. We think that control is a form of safety, but the Buddhist perspective invites us to look at the cost of this belief. When you try to control the pattern of your life, you are not protecting yourself. You are merely ensuring that you remain in a state of constant, low-level crisis. Consider the distinction between the pain that is inherent to being human and the pain we manufacture through our resistance. The first pain is life's natural weather. It is the grief of loss, the sting of disappointment, the reality of change, the fatigue of the body, and the inevitability of endings. You cannot opt out of these things. They are the warp and weft of the cloth itself. But then, there is the second pain, the one you add. This is the judgment you heap upon your own shoulders for feeling sad. It is the panic that arises because you believe you should have moved on by now. It is the story you weave about how your life should look, contrasted against the messy, unfinished reality of how it actually is. This second pain is a construction of the mind, a thread that you choose to pull over and over until your own spirit is frayed. We often turn our pain into an identity because, in a strange way, it feels like a place to live. If I am the person who is always struggling with these specific anxieties, I have a story to tell. I have a role to play. I have a reason for why things are not as they should be. But when we treat our suffering as a permanent feature of our character, we stop being the weaver and start becoming the debris. We identify with the stain on the cloth rather than the vast, clean space of the loom. This is why self-judgment is so destructive. You are trying to fix yourself through shame, hoping that if you critique yourself harshly enough, you will finally become the person you believe you need to be. But you cannot weave a beautiful life out of threads of self-contempt. Fear of uncertainty is the loom's constant, humming vibration. We are terrified of the gaps. We are afraid of the moments when the pattern is not yet visible, when the thread seems to lead into nothingness. Because we do not know what the next row of weaving will bring, we try to force the design to be something we recognize, something that feels secure. We rehearse failed conversations in our heads, hoping to rewrite the script so that we are never vulnerable again. We look at the past and try to find a pattern that guarantees our future safety. But the future is not a pattern to be deduced, it is a space to be inhabited. The Buddhist insight into this struggle is remarkably simple, though it often feels radical to the anxious mind. Peace is not the absence of difficulty. It is not the state where your life is perfectly ordered and every thread is in its rightful place. Peace is a different relationship with the difficulty you encounter. It is the capacity to notice the chaos without needing to become the architect of it. When you feel that tightness in your chest, that surge of worry about whether you are doing enough or being enough, or heading in the right direction, that is the moment to pause. That is the moment to realize that the tightness is not a requirement. It is an old automatic habit. You can learn to distinguish between the signal and the noise. The signal is the reality of the moment, the cool air, the physical sensation of the body, the immediate, small truth of where you are right now. The noise is the commentary, the narrative of how you have failed, the projection of how you will fail tomorrow, the demand that you must be in control. You do not have to obey the noise. You can acknowledge that it exists. You can notice its texture and its volume. But you do not have to pick up the shuttle to act on it. You can let the noise exist in the background, like the sound of a distant wind, while your attention remains grounded in the quiet, steady breath of your own presence. This is the meaning of letting go. It is not an act of surrender to the world, but an act of liberation from your own mental struggle. You are releasing the need to be the sole author of your reality. You are admitting that the design of your life is larger than your conscious planning. This shift is not passive. It is profoundly active. It requires a sustained, gentle discipline to notice when you have drifted back into the cycle of resistance. It takes courage to look at the parts of your life that you find messy or incomplete and choose, instead of reaching for the scissors, to sit with them as they are. The mind loves to rehearse because it fears that if it ever truly stops, something will go wrong. This is the superstition of the overthinker. We believe that our worry is a protective charm. But look at your history. Has the worry ever truly prevented the unexpected? Has the frantic planning ever made the path ahead smooth? The truth is that we suffer because we think we are in charge of the weather. We think that if we pull at the threads hard enough, we can stop the rain. But the rain falls regardless of our vigilance. The only thing we have truly altered is our own capacity for joy, our own ability to sleep, and our own inner landscape, which we have cluttered with the debris of 1,000 unplayed, fearful scenarios. There is a profound psychological safety in this realization. You are finally allowed to step away from the workbench. You are finally allowed to stop acting as the guard for a future that has not yet arrived. When you stop feeding the second pain, the first pain, the simple, natural difficulty of life, becomes manageable. It becomes something you can carry without being crushed. It becomes a part of your experience, rather than the entirety of your life. This is the heart of inner freedom. It is the recognition that while you cannot always control what happens, you can always choose how you relate to what is happening. Think of the way a tree stands in a storm. It does not try to stop the wind. It does not try to rewrite the laws of the weather. It bends, it yields. It allows the force to pass through it, its roots remaining deep in the earth, its core remaining intact. You have the same capacity. You have a root system, your awareness, your presence, your deep, quiet capacity to witness the movement of your life. You do not need to be rigid to be strong. In fact, it is your rigidity, your insistence on a specific outcome, that makes you vulnerable to snapping. Softness, on the other hand, is the source of true resilience. To be soft is to be ready for anything, because you are no longer defending a fixed position. As you lie here, notice the urge to think, to worry, to fix, to judge. Do not try to kill it. Do not try to push it away. Simply see it. It is just a pattern, a habitual rhythm of the mind that was formed long ago to keep you safe. You can thank that part of you for its effort, acknowledge that it was trying to help, and then let it be. You can gently remind yourself, this is just a thread. This is not the whole cloth. I do not have to weave this into anything. I do not have to solve this right now. You are in a space where the loom is resting, the tools are set aside, the workshop is dim and quiet, and you are not responsible for the pattern. You are just a human being, experiencing the evening, feeling the breath move through your chest, and allowing the silence to do the healing work that your thinking mind never could. There is no urgency, there is no call to labor. There is only the long, slow, and necessary process of returning to the center of your own life, where you are not the weaver, but the one who witnesses the weaving, perfectly, quietly, and entirely at rest. This wisdom is not reserved for mountain workshops or ancient stories. It is designed for the moments when your life feels too loud, too fast, or too demanding to possibly find stillness. Think of the times when the pressure to perform feels like a tightening of the warped threads, when you are waiting for a text message that feels like a judgment on your worth, or when you are lying awake at night, running through the day's conversations as if you could somehow edit them into a better version of yourself. These are the moments where the weaver's practice truly begins. When you feel that familiar itch to pick up the shuttle of worry, pause, just for the space of one breath. Notice what is happening. You are not failing to be peaceful. You are simply witnessing the habit of the mind trying to protect you by keeping you in a state of constant unproductive motion. When you feel the urge to check your phone to see if you have been validated, or to refresh a screen in hopes of relief, recognize that sensation. It is not a call for more information. It is a call for a moment of internal grounding. You are not broken because you seek connection or reassurance. You are simply human, and your mind has learned a narrow, frantic way of finding security. But you can choose in that small interval of time to acknowledge the desire without obeying it. You can simply notice, I am feeling the urge to control this outcome, and then let the breath move through you. By not acting on the impulse, you are setting down the heavy tool of your anxiety. You are showing your mind that you can exist in uncertainty without being consumed by it. Consider the feeling of being behind in life, that persistent, hollow sense that everyone else has already finished their tapestry, while yours remains a chaotic tangle of loose ends. That feeling is not a truth, it is a story. It is a story you have woven from comparisons and expectations that were never yours to begin with. When that feeling arises, do not try to argue with it. Do not try to weave a counter-argument to prove you are enough. Instead, look at the feeling itself. It is just a thread, a dark, heavy strand that has appeared on your loom. You don't have to use it. You can acknowledge that it is there. You can see how it makes you feel, and you can let it lie where it is, choosing instead to focus on the breath that is moving through you right now. The present moment is the only place where your life is actually unfolding, and it is a place where you are never behind, for you have not yet arrived at the future you are so afraid of missing. Even the simple act of choosing to rest can feel like a betrayal of your responsibilities. You might have noticed that when you finally stop to breathe, your mind immediately tells you that you haven't earned it, or that there is still something left to fix. That voice is not your own. It is the echo of the master weaver who never slept, the part of you that believes productivity is the only measure of worth. Tonight, challenge that belief with the quiet practice of surrender. You do not need to earn your rest. You do not need to finish the pattern to deserve the silence. You are a living, breathing part of the world, and just like the mountain or the river, you have a natural cycle that includes the necessity of dormant seasons. To rest is not to give up. To rest is to trust that the tapestry continues, even when you are not there to witness it. In your relationships, when you feel the urge to manipulate an outcome or to force someone to understand you, remember the weaver who stopped pulling the threads. We often try to weave our loved ones into the patterns we think they should occupy, and in doing so, we fray the very connections we are trying to preserve. Practice the art of listening without the need to correct, the art of being present without the need to direct. When you feel a conflict rising, take that single intentional breath. Let the tension in your hands subside. By loosening your grip on the outcome, you often create the very space that the other person needs to meet you. Truly and freely, the strongest connections are not the ones we hold the tightest. They are the ones we allow to breathe. If you are smiling while feeling heavy inside, if you are pretending to be okay because you fear that showing your vulnerability would be a failure of design, understand that this is the hardest kind of weaving there is. You are trying to maintain a surface that contradicts the reality of your heart. You do not need to shout your pain from the rooftops, but you do need to stop denying it to yourself. Admitting to yourself that you are tired is a profound act of honesty. It is the first step toward letting the loom sit quiet. You are allowed to be in process. You are allowed to be unfinished. You are allowed to be a person who is currently navigating a difficult part of the pattern, without that defining who you are in your entirety. When you are comparing your life to the polished images of others, remember that you are looking at the finished tapestry, not the weaver's struggle. You are seeing the product, not the frayed threads, the mistakes covered by knots, or the hours spent in doubt. You are looking at their surface. While you are experiencing the depth of your own inner life, it is not a fair comparison, and it is certainly not a kind one. If you must look at others, look at them with the recognition that they, too, are weavers, stumbling through their own unfinished work, carrying their own shards, and trying their best to find rest in the middle of their own complicated designs. You can be disciplined without being cruel. You can have goals without being consumed by them. The practice of mindfulness is the discipline of returning. Every time you realize you have been swept away by worry, you are practicing the most important movement of the weaver, the return to the present. It doesn't matter how many times you lose your way, how many times you pick up the shuttle of anxiety, or how many times you forget that you are the space and not the work. The beauty is in the return. It is in the gentle, repeated choice to come back to your breath, to come back to your heart, and to come back to the realization that you are already safe, already whole, and already enough. Think of your life as a practice room, not a courtroom. You are not here to be judged by the final result of your weaving, but to experience the act of living itself. When you find yourself wanting to fix a situation, ask yourself, what is the most compassionate thing I can do right now? Often, the answer is not to do more, but to do less. To stop pushing, to stop judging, to stop weaving and simply be. That is not weakness. That is the highest form of strength, the strength of the one who trusts the pattern enough to let it unfold. You are moving through your days as a participant, not a slave to the outcomes you imagine. When you feel overwhelmed, look for the small, concrete reality that grounds you, the feeling of your feet on the floor, the texture of the fabric in your hand, the sound of the wind, the simple, undeniable truth of the air moving in your lungs. These are your anchors. They are not grand or dramatic, but they are real. They are the threads that hold you to the earth while your mind tries to drift into the turbulent sky of the future. You are doing the work, dear friend, even when it feels like you are doing nothing at all. Every moment you choose to soften, every moment you choose to notice, every moment you choose to trust, that is the work. It is the work of a lifetime, and it is being done perfectly, one breath at a time. The loom is finally quiet. The cedar beams, so long held in the tension of your own making, now relax into the stillness of the mountain night. There is a profound mercy in this silence, a recognition that the pattern of your life does not require your hand to be upon the shuttle every second of the darkness. You have spent your time, your energy, and your spirit trying to ensure that no thread would go astray. But the night asks for none of this. The night asks only that you let the fabric rest. The silver shuttle lies deep within the cool water, and you are no longer the one who must keep the world from unraveling. That work is being done by the breath, by the movement of the stars, and by the very nature of the life that flows through you, independent of your desire to control it. Feel the heavy, comforting weight of your body as it settles into the surface beneath you. It is as if you are the tapestry itself, finally laid out upon the loom, no longer being pulled or prodded or strained. The threads of your attention are loosening, one by one. The thoughts that were once so sharp, so demanding of your focus, are now merely soft colors blurring into the deepening indigo of the room. You do not need to tuck them in. You do not need to fix the alignment. You are being held by the same stillness that holds the mountain and the valley, and you are free to sink into the gentle, rising tide of sleep. Every breath is a reminder that you are part of an unfolding design that is far older and far wiser than your worries. The inhale carries the quiet of the high air, and the exhale releases the last remnants of the day's labor. Notice the space where the air turns, the pause between the coming and the going. In that narrow, quiet gap, there is no weaving. There is no weaver. There is only the presence of being, clean and unadorned. You can drift here. You can hover in this space, untethered from the need to produce, to perfect, or to resolve. The patterns of tomorrow will arrive when they arrive, and they will be woven with the same life that is breathing you now. You do not have to prepare for them in the dark. The workshop on the mountain ledge is dark and cool, and the doors are unlatched. The wind outside continues its ancient song, moving through the grass and the trees, and you are no longer trying to capture that wind or force it into a shape. You are simply a witness to the night. Your hands are open, relaxed, and empty of the tools of your struggle. The muscles in your shoulders, your chest, and your jaw have finally yielded to the gravity of the earth. Everything that felt so heavy, so urgent, and so essential to hold on to is drifting away, leaving you light, leaving you soft, leaving you ready for the deep, dreamless quiet that is waiting to welcome you home. There is no need to count the threads. There is no need to survey the design to see if it is straight. Your responsibility for the day has reached its natural conclusion. You have walked the path. You have carried the weight, and you have learned the grace of setting the burden down. The tapestry of your existence is already being held by the vast, unfolding reality of the present moment. You are not the guardian of the cloth, you are the one who is being cradled by it. As the last embers of your mental effort fade, let your consciousness become as soft and as fluid as the water that hides your silver tool. The room is dissolving into the stillness. The sounds of the world are fading into the rhythmic, steady pulse of your own heart. You are not falling into a void, you are returning to the source of the weaving, the deep, silent ground from which all patterns emerge and to which they all eventually return. You are safe in this descent. You are supported by the very life that beats in your chest, the same life that never needs to sleep, but that invites you, with absolute kindness, to finally let go. The loom is silent, the mountain is still, and you, after so much striving, are finally allowed to be unfinished. The night does not demand perfection. It only offers rest. It only offers the infinite, cooling embrace of the dark, where you are not required to be anything, where you are not required to be anywhere, and where the story you have been telling yourself, the one about needing to fix, needing to save, and needing to control, finally reaches its quiet, beautiful end. There is no more pulling. There is no more tension. There is only the soft, endless unfolding of a life that is already held, already whole, and already at peace in the heart of the great quiet night. What if the rest you have been seeking was never a destination you had to reach, but the very silence that remained the moment you finally stopped trying to build your way to it?